saw last night, I think after the game, LaFleur was saying how that's the first time that they've been able to win in all three phases and win in all four quarters in a full 60-minute performance. And last year, you remember, there was a big back half surge for this team, similar to what's happening this year. Are the Packers becoming a team to be aware of in the NFC?
Are they the third best team in their own division, though? How crazy is that?
That is quite insane.
Good point.
I mean, yeah, like they're a threat, but it's crazy to think that this is a season in which they're a threat, but yet they may be the third threat in their own division, as we've seen the way that Minnesota has been able to play this year, and obviously Detroit, who continues to get it done despite all of the injuries they've got as a team, especially on defense. But I'll give Green Bay their credit. I mean, they're a team that right now looks to be in a position of the way they run the football, the way they're playing defense under new defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. They've got some things and pieces in place that you have to like their positioning on. It just depends on right now who they draw in that wild card round. Right now, it seems like it may be the Rams. If there's a 3-6 matchup, if the Rams win their division, and then Green Bay kind of stands pat, and they're the number 6 seed. So I can see that, but they earned a lot of confidence last year. I know it's some new guys, right? Josh Jacobs and a couple other players who they've drafted, but they earned a lot of confidence being a 7 seed, going to Dallas and beating them last year. So they probably have that carryover again this year.
So, Kirk, let's look ahead to the Christmas Day games tomorrow. You got the Chiefs and the Steelers and the Ravens and the Texans. And before we get to the matchups, I was curious. You played in the league a long time, for 8 years. And I'm wondering how you feel about the idea, because it was only about a year ago that the NFL was saying, we won't play on Christmas Day if Christmas Day falls on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Here it is on a Wednesday, and the Chiefs are going to be playing their third game in 10 days. What do you make of that from a player safety, player health perspective, and in terms of the gameplay we might see because of the grind on these guys?
Well, I mean, the Chiefs are 2-0. If they win this next game, they're 3-0, and they've got like a 2-week off break that they probably may not even have to play in that final week 18 matchup versus the Denver Broncos. Look, I've always said this. The NFL is very challenging. It's very hard. But they make the schedule the way they do, and it's not like it's just for one team. They make it for multiple teams who have this similar schedule. The same could be said for the Houston Texans, Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers, who are all playing good football at the right time. The NFL, if you turn it on, we're going to watch it. And I think over the last couple years, you've seen that. I've been to a Christmas Day game a couple years ago, the whole slime game here in Los Angeles with the Broncos versus the Rams. And people showed up, people watched. If you put National Football League games on television, the consumer is going to watch it. And the NFL realizes that, and now you're putting two marquee matchups on Christmas Day. I know I'm going to be watching. I would love to even be there. It's definitely taken over the NBA, but, again, just to kind of go back to your player safety point, I feel like this is what everyone has to go through. Everyone is going through it. And I've always said this, at the end of the day, you never hear people complain after the game. It's maybe before, we're hurt, we're banged up, but you never hear people talk about it afterwards, because that long break, man, always feels great. And those teams will have a lot of time to rest up before they have what I think, they're all making a playoff, so that's a little bit even easier now that they've got a little bit of rest going into a possible Week 18 matchup that they may need to play hard in, or giving them an extra week of rest if they've already feel like they've got their seating already in lock.
With Kirk Morrison, former NFLer, and let's dive into this matchup, Chiefs and Steelers. I think it's still 2.5 is what the spread is currently over on FanDuel. Yeah. And the Chiefs, it's been an interesting season. I mean, they're 14-1, but there's been a lot of close calls in this one. Do you expect another close, gritty game here between the Chiefs and Steelers tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a home game for the for the Pittsburgh Steelers. To me, we know it's going to be a close game, close matchup. That's the way the Steelers play. Games are always coming down close. It's kind of surprising the way it went to a double-digit lead, last week versus the Baltimore Ravens, but that was because of a pick six George Pickens, I think, returns for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're at home in their place. I actually think the Kansas City Chiefs, this may be a loss for them. I really believe Pittsburgh is, playing with an edge, having lost last week, not playing their best football and turn it over. I kind of like the position that they're in, and I'm going to take the I'm going to take the Pittsburgh Steelers to beat the Chiefs. I think it's just that one game, 3 games, like you mentioned, 10, 11 days. I just feel like it may be a little bit too much, just depending on some, injury situations with guys. Patrick Mahomes will be fine, but Chris Jones probably, not 100%. I just think that the Steelers win an ugly, sluggish game at home, and they take over, and we'll see where that puts them at as they try to, capture the division crown, and so they can host a home playoff game there at Acrisure Stadium.
Well, the other narrative, I guess, coming into this week, Kirk, and you finished off your career in Buffalo, so you know what it means to fans of the Bills, how starved Buffalo is for success. And there was a feeling that Josh Allen had the MVP race probably wrapped up a couple of weeks ago, and then a bit of an uneven performance in a squeaky win against the Patriots, with Lamar Jackson continuing to fire on all cylinders for the Ravens, has people thinking it might be still a bit of a race here. Lamar and the Ravens playing the Texans. What do you think the chances are that Lamar Jackson can catch Josh Allen down the stretch here and make this MVP race maybe more compelling than we thought it might be?
Yeah, I think one of the difficult things is that we never forget the primetime games, right? Those are the ones that we get a chance to sit around. They're what I call the standalone games. And so those are the ones that kind of leave the lasting impression on you throughout. And I say that because watching now Lamar Jackson play on Christmas Day, the only game, you'll be able to watch and see how he either takes over a game, how he's the best player on the field. We'll watch that. And it's hard to forget that, especially in a time where the votes are going to be, the voting starting right now in terms of that actual award, the MVP. So that kind of puts Josh Allen behind the 8 ball a little bit, and the games that mean a lot. The Buffalo Bills wrapped up their division win how long ago? So there's not really that game that you say, oh, wow, we got to watch this game for this particular reason. The Buffalo Bills are already in the playoffs. They're hoping that Kansas City loses twice, which I just don't see happening. And so it's kind of crazy that Josh Allen doesn't really have that meaningful game that you want to see him take over and have an unbelievable performance. It's almost to a point where you may want to preserve Josh Allen a little bit and get ready for the playoffs, whereas the Baltimore Ravens are playing for not only a division title, they're also playing for their seeding as well. That's why I think this is going to be a difficult now last couple of weeks, because I'll be honest, here in Los Angeles, I got a chance to see that Josh Allen game where he threw for 3 touchdowns and he rushed for 3 touchdowns. And I just said the next day, hey, just give this guy the MVP now. I mean, he's the best player in the NFL this season. And Lamar Jackson comes off of a bye week and it's just been outstanding. Like, hey, look at what I'm doing. And you're like, oh, my God, you can't discredit what he's doing.
With Kirk Morrison and the court.
Leafs facing center crisis amid injuries, eyeing trade market for solutions. As the Toronto Maple Leafs battle through a growing injury list and a suspension, their lack of depth at the center position has become a glaring issue. According to Sportsnet's Elliotte Friedman in his latest 32 Thoughts article, the Leafs are among the teams exploring trade options to bolster their lineup. This effort is coming amid increasing competition from teams like the Chicago Blackhawks and Nashville Predators, who have also set their sights on improving their center depth. Friedman didn't mince words about the Leafs' predicament. The teams currently focusing on centers, including Chicago and Nashville, must consider when others will enter the market. Toronto will undoubtedly be one of those teams, he wrote. While the Blackhawks and Predators may have an edge in terms of cap space and assets, the Leafs remain a team to watch as the season progresses. The Leafs situation is urgent, with up to 7 forwards currently unavailable due to injury or suspension. Ryan Reeves is serving a 5-game suspension, while key players like Austin Matthews, upper body, Matthew Knies, upper body, Kaje Jarnkrok, groin/sports hernia, David Kampf, lower body, Max Domi, lower body, and Max Pacioretty, lower body, are all sidelined. The team has even considered temporarily shifting Mitch Marner to the center position, highlighting the severity of their depth issues. This isn't just a short-term concern for the Leafs. Depth at center has been a persistent challenge for the team, And while stopgap solutions like Marner could help in the interim, the front office appears keen to explore longer-term fixes. For fans of the blue and white, this has been a recurring theme. The Leafs' center depth often becomes a problem at the worst possible times. James Myrtle of The Athletic recently added more fuel to the speculation, naming several potential trade targets who could help the Leafs address their issues. Among them is Ryan O'Reilly, a familiar name for Toronto fans. O'Reilly, who signed a 4-year, $18 million deal with Nashville in 2023, might be a trade candidate if the Predators' underwhelming start to the season, 6-11-3, 31st in the league, prompts a rebuild. However, his steep price tag and history with the Leafs, including rejecting a free agency offer less than 2 years ago, make this a complex and potentially unlikely move. Other names mentioned by Myrtle include former Leaf Nazem Kadri, currently with Calgary, as well as players like Michael Granlund, Nick Jugstad, Brock Nelson, Yanni Gourde, Trent Frederic, Radek Faksa, and Sean Kuraly. While some of these options seem more plausible than others, it's clear that general manager Brad Treliving will need to get creative to find the right piece without mortgaging the team's future. Cap space remains one of the biggest obstacles for the Leafs. Unlike teams like Chicago and Nashville, which have more flexibility and assets, Toronto is walking a financial tightrope. As Friedman noted, competition will intensify as cap-constrained teams strive to create room. For the Leafs, that could mean waiting for the market to develop further, a risky move given their current needs. The situation also highlights the Leafs' ongoing struggle to build a roster that can withstand the grueling nature of an NHL season. Injuries are an inevitability in hockey, but Toronto's current predicament underscores the importance of depth, a quality the team has struggled to consistently maintain. Looking back on recent years, the Leafs have often leaned heavily on their star players, particularly Matthews, Marner, and William Nylander. While these players have delivered in spades, the lack of reliable depth options has left the team vulnerable in critical moments. The current crisis at center is merely the latest example of this recurring issue. Some fans have called for more aggressive moves from Treliving, arguing that now is the time to strike while the team's core is in its prime. Others, however, are more cautious, pointing to the dangers of overpaying for short-term fixes. Striking the right balance will be key, especially as the Leafs aim to keep their championship window open. Despite the challenges, there's no denying that Toronto has the talent to be a contender, provided they can patch up their lineup. The ongoing rumors and speculation surrounding potential trades show that the Leafs are at least exploring every avenue to strengthen their roster. For fans of the blue and white, this moment feels like a pivotal point in the season. With a lineup ravaged by injuries and a tough schedule ahead, the Leafs must act decisively to avoid falling behind in the standings. The addition of a dependable center could be the difference between weathering the storm or watching another season slip away. Whether it's O'Reilly, Kadri, or another surprise name, one thing is certain: the Leafs are under pressure to deliver. And for a fan base as passionate and loyal as Toronto's, there's no room for excuses. The time to act is now, and Leafs Nation is watching closely. As the trade deadline approaches, the stakes couldn't be higher. Will Treliving pull off a move that solidifies the Leafs' status as a contender, or will the search for center depth become yet another chapter in the team's long history of what-ifs? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, it's never boring in Leafs land. As the Maple Leafs navigate this critical juncture, their fan base remains as vocal as ever. Toronto is a city that breathes hockey, and the pressure on Brad Treliving to make the right moves is immense. Every decision he makes, or doesn't make, will be scrutinized, from talk radio to social media, where Leafs Nation is already debating the merits of the various names being floated as potential trade targets. Among the louder debates is whether the team should prioritize a high-profile acquisition like Ryan O'Reilly or Nazem Kadri, or focus on a lower-cost, reliable center who can fill a supporting role without costing too many future assets. While O'Reilly's leadership and playoff experience make him an attractive option, his contract and recent history with the Leafs add layers of complexity to any potential reunion. Similarly, Kadri's gritty, two-way playstyle remains a fan favorite, but his cap hit and availability might render him an unrealistic target. Another factor complicating the Leafs situation is their tight salary cap. While Chicago and Nashville can make moves with relative ease due to their financial flexibility, Toronto must navigate a labyrinth of constraints to make any trade work. This likely means including salary retention or moving existing contracts to make room, which could drive up the cost of any potential deal. The question then becomes, how much are the Leafs willing to sacrifice to address their immediate needs? One potential trade partner generating buzz is the Seattle Kraken. Yanni Gourde, a dependable two-way center, has been mentioned as a possible target. Gourde's versatility and championship pedigree from his time with Tampa Bay make him an appealing option. Seattle, however, is in playoff contention and may not be inclined to part with a key piece unless the Leafs can provide a substantial return. Another intriguing name is Brock Nelson of the New York Islanders. Nelson is a consistent scorer and reliable faceoff-man, qualities that would undoubtedly bolster Toronto's center depth. However, the Islanders are notoriously cautious when it comes to trades, and prying Nelson away would likely require a significant package, including picks or prospects that the Leafs may be hesitant to part with. For all the trade talk, some analysts believe the solution might come from within. Sheldon Keefe has shown a willingness to experiment with his lineup, and players like Pontus Holmberg or Fraser Minten could be given an opportunity to step up. While relying on less experienced players carries risks, it might be the Leafs' only option if the trade market proves too costly or slow to develop. Adding to the Leafs' urgency is the timing. The Atlantic Division remains one of the toughest in the league, with teams like Boston, Florida, and Tampa Bay continuing to dominate. Any prolonged slump could see Toronto slip further down the standings, putting their playoff hopes in jeopardy. For a team with Stanley Cup aspirations, failing to address their weaknesses could have catastrophic consequences. Brad Treliving's history as a general manager suggests he's not afraid to make bold moves. His time with the Calgary Flames was marked by blockbuster trades, including the acquisition of Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar in the Matthew Tkachuk deal. Leafs fans hope he brings that same decisiveness to Toronto, especially as the trade deadline looms. Beyond the immediate need for a center, this situation underscores a broader issue with the Leafs roster construction. Depth has been a perennial concern, and while Toronto boasts some of the league's top-end talent, their reliance on a handful of stars has left them vulnerable in moments like this. Moving forward, addressing this imbalance must be a priority for the front office if the team is to achieve sustained success. As the Leafs head into a critical stretch of the season, the next few weeks could define their trajectory.